That summer, my buddy Mark and I were looking for a cheap place to rent near Phoenix. We found a small duplex on the outskirts of town, and the rent was unbelievably low. The landlord was an older guy who lived in the other half of the building. The place was old, a bit dusty, but it had a small, enclosed backyard with an old pool, which was all we really cared about with the Arizona heat. The first few days were exactly what we needed. We spent most of our time in the pool, and at night, we'd hang out in the living room playing video games. But a few nights in, things started to feel off. It was a little after midnight when we first heard it. A quiet, rhythmic scraping sound from the backyard. It sounded like something heavy being dragged across the concrete near the pool. We both stopped what we were doing and just listened. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I told myself it was probably just the wind blowing something around, but there was no wind. The air was dead still. Mark looked at me a little freaked out and whispered, "What was that?" We crept over to the back door and peeked through the blinds. The yard was pitch black. We couldn't see anything. The sound stopped. We were about to turn away when the old, single pool light flickered on with a buzzing sound. The water was still, reflecting the light perfectly. And right there, at the deep end, stood a man. He was tall, completely bald, and wearing a dark, boxy suit, one of those old-fashioned ones from the 1940s. He was just standing there, staring at the water. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. Why was he in our backyard, in a suit, at this time of night? Then he moved. He started slowly dragging a long, thin object through the water. It looked like a bent old rake, but the tines were jagged and irregular. The sound it made was eerie, a slow swish, swish, swish through the water. My heart was pounding, and I motioned for Mark to be quiet. We couldn't take our eyes off him. He repeated the motion, dragging the rake back and forth for what felt like an eternity. With each pass, he seemed to be searching for something at the bottom of the pool. After a few minutes, he lifted the rake, and that's when we saw it. Hooked on the end of the rake was a pale, life-sized mannequin head. Her hair was matted and wet, and her eyes were wide open, staring directly at our window. The rake was bent under her chin, with one jagged tine piercing her cheek. The water dripped from her face. My stomach twisted, and I nearly gagged, pulling back from the window. Mark let out a choked gasp, his hand clamped over his mouth. The man in the suit stopped. He slowly, deliberately, turned his head toward our window. We couldn't see his eyes in the faint light, but we knew he was looking directly at us. Then, with a wide, unnatural grin that seemed to stretch his face, he raised the mannequin head higher, as if showing it to us, before dropping it back into the water with a loud splash. We stumbled back from the window, breathing heavily. The sheer absurdity of the scene was what made it so terrifying. We didn't wait to see what he would do next. We scrambled to the front door, fumbling with the lock. We could hear the rhythmic swish, swish, swish starting up again from the backyard. We burst out of the house, piled into my car, and sped away without a second thought. We didn't bother to grab our things. The only thing that mattered was getting as far away as possible. We drove until we found a cheap motel near the interstate, where we spent the rest of the night shaking in fear. The next morning, I called our landlord, trying to explain what had happened, how some strange man had broken in. He listened quietly, then sighed. "Oh, that was just my brother. He has a hobby. He likes to collect things from the pool." My mind raced. "Your brother? What was he doing with a mannequin head?" The landlord's voice went cold, a chilling rasp I hadn't heard before. "He wasn't collecting the head. He was looking for the rest of her." The call ended. Mark and I just stared at each other, the weight of those words settling over us. We never went back to that house. We packed our things from a distance later, and we never saw the landlord or his brother again. But to this day, I can still hear that scraping sound, and I still see that pale face in my nightmares, her wide eyes staring right at me from the murky depths of the pool. And I still wonder, what was he looking for? This happened a long time ago, so long that I rarely talk about it anymore. I was fresh out of college, starting my first job in a big city. To save money, I rented a small apartment on the top floor of an old building. It was a bit run down, but it got great natural light and was close to the subway. Most importantly, it was cheap. At the time, everything felt great. Until that summer. My job had rotating shifts, and once or twice a week, I'd work a night shift, getting home around 2 or 3 in the morning. This particular night, it was about 2:30 a.m. when I got off the subway and walked down the dimly lit alley to my building. The alley was empty, and the street lights cast fragmented shadows on the ground. I was fumbling for my keys, just thinking about getting home, taking a hot shower, and going to sleep. But as I reached the building and looked up at my window, my heart dropped. My window was open. I remember it so clearly. I had locked it before I left. I'm a bit obsessive about things like that, and I always check the windows and doors before I go out, even though I was on the top floor. But now that window was open, and I could see it swaying slightly in the night breeze. I stood there, my palms sweating, debating whether to go up. A little voice in my head told me I must have remembered wrong, that the lock hadn't caught, and the wind had just blown it open. I took a deep breath and tried to act calm as I walked into the stairwell. The motion-activated lights came on behind me, one by one, then turned off, the sound like a countdown. When I got to my door, I took a deep breath, put the key in the lock, and carefully turned it. Click! I held my breath and pushed the door open. The apartment was pitch black, with only the distant city lights spilling a little bit of light onto the floor. The air had a strange smell, not moldy, but something old and wrong. I closed the door, left the lights off, and tiptoed into the kitchen to grab a kitchen knife. I don't know why I did it. It was just a primal instinct to have something in my hand. I hugged the wall and moved slowly through the living room. As I passed the bedroom door, I heard a sound. It was faint, like someone rubbing fabric or trying to stifle their breathing. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I ducked behind the bedroom doorframe, holding my breath, listening. The sound was in there, close, maybe by the bed. My mind went blank, and my body was stiff as a board. I gripped the knife so hard my knuckles went white. Suddenly, I heard a slight clatter, like something had fallen to the floor. Then the sound stopped. The room went silent. I stared at the bedroom door, forgetting to breathe. After what felt like an eternity, just as I was starting to think I'd imagined it, a huge black shadow lunged at me from behind the doorframe. It wasn't a shadow, it was a person. I could hear the whoosh of them lunging, and I could smell the sickening stench of sweat. I screamed and, on pure instinct, swung the knife wildly at the figure. The blade cut through the air with a high-pitched whoosh, and I have no idea if I hit him or not. All I knew was that he missed. I stumbled backward, hitting the living room table. A vase fell to the floor and shattered. I didn't care. I just turned and ran for the door. I yanked the door open and sprinted into the hallway. I didn't wait for the motion lights. I just scrambled down the stairs in the dark, falling once and scraping my knee, but I didn't stop. I kept going until I burst out of the building and into the alley, and only then did I dare to look back. My apartment window was still open. The entrance to the stairwell was a black void. There was no one there. I didn't go back. I ran to the nearest 24/7 convenience store and called the police, my hands shaking. They came and went up with me to my apartment. Everything was exactly as I had left it, except for the broken vase and a puddle of water on the floor. The police found no evidence of a break-in, no fingerprints, no footprints, nothing. They just said I was probably tired and had imagined it. But I know I didn't. I know I wasn't alone in that dark apartment. I moved out the next day and never went back. But to this day, every time I come home, I double-check the windows, afraid of seeing that open pane again. I always feel like that shadow is still out there, somewhere, watching and waiting. Waiting for the next time I forget to lock my window. Waiting for the next time I come home alone. It happened a few years ago. I had just graduated from college and was working the night shift at a small printing factory. The job itself was simple, just monitoring the machines, but because it was in an industrial area, I was practically the only person in the factory at night. It wasn't a peaceful quiet, it was a heavy, oppressive silence. Outside the factory was a large patch of overgrown wasteland, and beyond that, an abandoned railway track. My office had a small window that faced the wasteland. I usually kept the blinds drawn, but I remember a thunderstorm that night. With the lightning and thunder, I felt an inexplicable urge to open the blinds and see what the wasteland looked like in the flashes of light. At first, there was nothing unusual, just the sound of rain and thunder. Then a bolt of lightning illuminated the entire world in a stark white light. I saw a shadow deep in the wasteland. It was a person, thin and tall, standing motionless in the waist-high grass like a tree. The lightning passed, and darkness swallowed everything again. I told myself I must have been mistaken, that it was just an afterimage on my retina. But a few minutes later, another lightning strike cut across the sky, and the shadow was still there. Not only was it there, but it seemed to have moved forward, closer to the factory building. My heart started to pound. I tried to tell myself it was probably a homeless person or a crazy person, and with all the rain, they had to be looking for shelter. I tried to rationalize it and forced myself to get back to work. However, the feeling of being watched grew stronger and stronger. I started hearing strange sounds outside the window. Not rain, not wind. It was a scratching sound, like someone dragging their nails across the glass, sharp and grating. My body went rigid. I didn't dare move, didn't even dare to look at the window. I shrank into my chair, my palms slick with sweat. The sound came and went, sometimes close, sometimes far, as if the thing was circling the window. Eventually, I worked up the courage to tiptoe to the window and peek through a gap in the blinds. The wasteland was pitch black, and I couldn't see anything. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking I was just being paranoid. Just as I was about to turn away, another flash of lightning lit up the area outside the window. This time, I saw it clearly. A face was pressed against the glass, pale and distorted, with no pupils in its eyes, just two black holes. Its nose was flattened against the glass, and its mouth was open in a silent scream. What terrified me most was a scar on that face, running from the eyebrow, all the way down to the chin. I had seen that face before, on a wanted poster we had printed at the factory. I screamed and stumbled backward, hitting the machine behind me with a loud thud. The noise seemed to startle the thing, and it let out a low growl. I heard a loud bang on the glass, followed by more thuds, each one louder than the last. It was trying to smash its way in. I scrambled to the office door, trying to lock it, but the doorknob wouldn't turn. I realized then that the lock had already been broken. I heard the sound of glass shattering behind me, followed by a click as something entered. I didn't dare turn around, only pushed desperately on the door. Just as I was about to get it open, a cold hand reached out from behind me and clamped over my mouth. I smelled a rotting odor, and a hoarse, breathless voice whispered in my ear, "Quiet. Don't move." In that moment, I felt all the strength drained from my body. I struggled, but the hand was incredibly strong. I could feel its nails digging into my skin. Just as I thought I was going to die right there, the main factory door suddenly swung open. It was my coworker. He had come back for something he forgot. My coworker saw the office door was ajar and walked in, curious. As his footsteps got closer, I felt the hand covering my mouth instantly loosen. I took the chance and bit down hard. The figure cried out in pain, let go, and retreated into the dark corner like a flash of lightning. My coworker pushed the door open and saw me huddled in the corner, my face covered in blood and terror. When the police arrived, they found a lot of blood and fingerprints on the office window, along with a few strands of black hair. They told us the man had been wandering in the area and had been wanted for years. He had likely been watching our factory, waiting for an opportunity. The most chilling part was that the police found a wooden box buried in the dirt beneath the window. Inside were photos of me, all taken while I was working at the factory. After that, I quit the night shift. Now every time I pull open my curtains, I can't help but glance outside, afraid of seeing that face in the dark. I don't know where he went or if he's still somewhere watching me. That feeling is like a cold snake coiled around my heart, and I can never shake it off.